FightHype.com. I'm here joined with Carl Moretti. How's it going?
All good. Just finished the press conference in Norfolk. Looking forward to another big event.
You know, the first time you brought Keyshawn here, there was over 10,000 people. That was without a title. It was a debut of one of the brothers. It kind of seemed like it didn't have everything to possibly make it the second time even bigger. So what are you expecting for this turnaround?
Well, the Scope is an old building. You can't put any more seats in it. So I just expect a little bit more frenziness in the office and people selling tickets, you know, like we did the last time. Yes, he's returning as a world champion. So, you know, I expect the same thing again.
How hard was it to keep it at the Scope? Because last time I heard people were saying that they might have to be at a bigger venue for how many people came.
You know, one of the things we thought about was going to DC, you know, and up in that area, and because there's some bigger arenas, or maybe down to Atlanta. But I think because it's his first title defense, just like Sweet Pea, and returning home with the crown, it's a little bit better of a story, as you can see from this turnout today. So, you know, that's all stuff for the future. But the fact that he's returning as a world champion is a great story.
Now, De Los Santos, an opponent that seemed like a lot of people didn't want to face. You know, he fought Shakur Stevenson. He knocked out Rayo Venezuela, became a champion. So, homecoming fight, typically they always say it's supposed to be easy. So, why did De Los Santos fight do you think was perfect?
You know, you're right about those things. It just, you know, you're looking for somebody with some name recognition, of course. The division isn't as thick as it used to be. Quite honestly, he wanted to fight, you know, and said he'd be ready for it. And we took him on his word, and it proved to be the case. So, yeah, it's an interesting fight. You can get distracted with everything going on in a homecoming fight, which makes things a little bit more nervous for all of us. But I think Keyshawn's beyond that point where he's not going to let anybody beat him, much less in his hometown.
Did you have to do any like last-minute adjustment? Because I know that there was kind of talking about purse and money things on Twitter a little bit, and you came and said, "Whoa, we paid a lot more than that." So was it already kind of set, or?
You know what it is? It's just the way normal boxing business goes nowadays. You know, you get a fighter to agree on something, and then the guy who cuts his hair tells him he should be getting this, or the guy who washes his car should be saying, "Well, why aren't you getting this?" And they listen to that. But after talking to Sampson, his promoter, and Louis DeCubas at PBC, it got straightened out in one day, and there's no big problems anymore.
You said those words of PBC and Top Rank. I mean, are we expecting to see potentially more of those things happening in the future?
If the fight makes sense, the fights will get made. You know, there's a couple of matchups that we're talking about now. We're trying to get past the finish line with Fundura and Xander Zayas. There's another fight that we're talking about that isn't out there on Twitter, which is amazing considering the way the world is today. So yeah, if they can get made, they will get made, because it's just a matter of keeping communications open.
Before I switch gears, just getting back to Keyshawn, you know, promoted a lot of big stars, and I know that in this case, Keyshawn has delivered a lot from MSG to here at the Scope Arena. A lot of people are looking at this as like a barometer. I know Shakur and Keyshawn were in the face, but kind of like that fight where if he outperforms Shakur, they might kind of...
Yeah, I get it. It's like, you know, they want to compare performances, you know, but I can tell you firsthand, when Shakur fought De Los Santos, I didn't even think he was going to be able to get it to the ring. He had an elbow that was, you know, dislocated probably. He had a finger that was bad. He had a problem with his knee. A lot of other fighters would have pulled out. So I'm not making excuses for him. It didn't.
He was sick too, right?
Yeah, he had everything going on that week except the right stuff. So I wouldn't necessarily, you know, hold that against Shakur. You know, you've seen him in the past, and that's obviously not what he was that night. So, you know, it's okay. Look, I expect Keyshawn to do great things with De Los Santos, but I expect a great fight out of De Los Santos too, because he knows it's kind of his last chance. That's why you ring the bell and see what happens.
Do you think any likelihood that, and I know it's unforeseen, but I know Raymond Muay Thai has a fight on May 10th. Maybe a unification.
Sure.
Or is it?
Yeah, no, I mean, Muay Thai is one of the best in the division. He's got his hands full with Abdullayev for the IBF title. A unification fight with the winner makes sense before the end of the year. Let's just hope that Raymond comes through with it, okay? You know, he's a really good fighter, and he'll have a belt too. So I think as these guys get to that status, a lot of options will change for everybody.
Do you think any chances of Lomachenko, or is that just still unsure?
You know, we haven't heard much from the Lomachenko camp. I honestly don't know what he's going to do next. He has every right to decide, and take his time what he's going to do next. But sure, if he wants to fight and fight a Keyshawn or a Muratai, those fights are available. If he wants to fight Tank Davis, why not? But I think it's still a personal decision that he's contemplating, and we'll know when everybody else knows.
My last couple questions is Abdullah Mason's back. Quick.
Yeah, I was like,
guys keep him extremely active and busy, but a tough fight with a guy who lost to Foster former. I mean, if Raymond wins, it'd be essentially 2 world champions, right? So why that fight, and how do you expect?
The fight that he had back in Norfolk was really eye-opening. He hit the canvas twice. He dropped the other guy 3 times. So I think it's a natural for him to fight here and build his profile with Keyshawn's fans. Why not? Nakatia, we leave that up to Bruce and Brad. And if you're going to co-feature, then those are the type of guys you need to be ready for. We have the utmost confidence in him that he'll be ready for Nakatia. He's on a 3-fight win streak against decent opposition, so it's a great test for him here.
I'm sure you saw Floyd Schofield Sr. talk a little about $2.5 million. Was there actually an offer to attempt to make the fight or at any point, or what was that?
Somebody told me about it, but I have way too many things to do during the day than worry about what Floyd Schofield says on video, so I really couldn't tell you what it's about.
But is there a potential of the future maybe? Because I know that...
Well, anytime Floyd Schofield wants to fight Abdullah Mason or Keyshawn Davis, or we got a guy who's got 5 fights, if he wants to fight him too, we're more than happy to entertain that.
You also on stage talked about Andy Cruz in a way where I know that at a certain point, certain fights have to make sense, right? I know that hardcores want them, but
everybody knows the history between Andy Cruz and Keyshawn. They're going to fight when it's right, and it's coming sooner than people think. I just wish Andy Cruz, they know him because of his amateur career, rightfully so. Please, let's do something as a pro, and we'll get there. And he's on his way to doing those things. But that's going to be a big fight when it happens, and we can't wait for it.
Do you think it's the right way for them to kind of keep marking himself as the guy that
Well, that's all they can. That's all they can go on. We've seen his fights in the ring. He's beaten 10-round guys, jab, jab, right hand, move to the left. We've seen this act before, so I get it. So I guess if that's the way they want to market it, then fine, be it. We'll just keep defending our world title.
You said sooner than we think. Is there just kind of a time frame? It's too soon to ask that.
I think as long as Keyshawn stays at 135, and he will be for a while, I could see that fight happen.
Awesome. And I had a quick question. Sparing you, I guess.
Was it about?
Oh, you're helping me out. This is great.
I'm trying to think. What is it? Not about the May 4th show in a way, or those guys, or?
We could talk about that. I mean, obviously, I know the Nakatani fight, and it's kind of rumored to be something.
Yeah, it's too early to talk. There's nothing a lot there yet.
But it's definitely.
Oh, I think it'll happen. Yeah, I think it'll happen in 2026.
But MJ is more likely if he gets past.
For Japan.
So, just kind of curious, how did that fight happen? Because I know that they're stablemates, and I know that at a certain point.
Yeah, I didn't know they were stablemates when we made the fight, honestly.
Oh, really?
He wanted to come to the U.S. It's Mexican Independence Weekend. There's not a lot of guys at 122 pounds to fight. We thought it was going to be Alan Picasso, but somehow he thought he was worth more than he really is. No disrespect. And we ended up with a solid fighter in Cardenas. So that's where we find ourselves with, Rafa Espinoza and Emilio Vargas on the card as well. So it'll be a good weekend.
Is he going to end up potentially fighting one time in Saudi Arabia? Because I know he's essentially a reigning.
I heard, who knows? Probably. I heard the Nick Ball name. Everybody's calling out Nick Ball. So maybe that happens at the end of the year, but I don't have any kind of hard, concrete information about it.
Shushu Carrington is a guy who's been performing tremendously, and it seemed like he wanted to go with Stephen Fulton, but there's talks about maybe Fulton going up to Shaki Foster. Are you guys trying to make Shushu and Fulton, and it just went?
We were, he's the mandatory for the BC 126-pound title. The champion is Stephen Fulton. We love the fight. We did have discussions with PBC about it. they asked us, because listen, Fulton wants to go up and try it at 130 against your champion O'Shaquie Forster, so we're in discussions about that fight now. So if that scenario happens, then hopefully Shushu will fight Ray Vargas for the title. If it doesn't, then he'll fight Stephen Fulton.
Yeah. Oh, really? So even if Stephen Fulton fights O'Shaquie?
No. If he fights O'Shaquie, he'll fight Ray Vargas, hopefully.
Oh, if they don't...
Right. If Fulton moves out of the weight class, I can't, he's got every right to do what he wants. I wouldn't want to fight Shushu either. I'd rather fight, another world champion, but it's going to take about another couple of weeks to figure that out.
I know there's Espinoza, who's on a tear, stopped Robisi, and he's fighting also on that big card on so.
Yep.
I mean, Shushu and Espinoza, I know there's a lore of Espinoza that's so fight.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if Shushu wins the title, you unify him. I mean, I'm not sure Rafa Espinoza has another fight at 126 after this, given his size. So he might be at 130 and 35 before anybody. So we'll know more after May 4th on who's going to go where.
My last question is Teofimo Lopez is going to be fighting Barboza. It's going to be a big event, big card, and things like that. So after the Barboza fight, where does it go from there? Is he kind of in the mix with certain guys?
Well, he really wants to fight Boots Ennis and go for a welterweight title. So why not? I mean, if he wants to make a run at it, we're all for it. He's got to get past Barboza. It's a good fight. Maybe he tries to fight one of the other 40-pound champions after that. But if it's about making big fights and Boots has got that name there, maybe it's a fight that can be discussed as well.
You guys were in serious negotiations prior, and I know that I'm just asking, was it like almost close or something? Or?
No, I mean, we were in discussions with Matchroom about it. It was more of Boots like saying, I get it. I kind of want to unify the welterweight division, which is what he's trying to do now. So it's not like there was paperwork drawn up, so I got to respect Boots' decision for wanting to unify titles at 47, and then maybe he'd do it. But, this is boxing. Sometimes you can't always get those fights, so maybe he'll look at Teofimo again.
The Brian Norman fight's realistic? Because I know
Brian Norman, I foresee fighting this summer, or actually I foresee fighting pretty soon in an interesting fight. And then I could see, if he comes out okay, I could see him and Boots maybe unifying at the end of the year.
I know the hiccup between the money situation. They were saying they wanted more, this and that. I mean, does the price go up now more? Like, is that because...
It's not about the money, it's about the money. We hear that a lot. Different times, different circumstances, different money. It'll be what, the fight's worth, what somebody will pay for it. So you just take it from there.
Maybe Turkey can is that a possibility? Or just
it's always a possibility with His Excellency, so you never know.